tai ki te koe. Ka barikata aho, ko te kairahi o te putea whaikakaro. Ki a koe Adrian Orr, rawa ko te minita Hemi Shaw i whanganui Tara. Ngā mihi nui ki a kaurua. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Whānau, whānau. Hara mai te toki, haungie, huie, taihuie. So hi everybody, I'm Barry Coates. I'm founder and CEO of Mindful Money. A very warm welcome to you all. We're really glad you're here. The last time we tried to have a conference, Auckland went down into lockdown the day beforehand, and we had to go online. So we've been watching the daily COVID announcements with a certain amount of trepidation, and we thought everything was clear until Sunday at 1 p.m. when the lockdown didn't finish according to plan. And so we are missing some of our guests from Australia, and as you'll see, we're missing some of our presenters from Wellington, but they are here in spirit and they will be here on Zoom. So the show goes on. Our greetings to those who are participating online from Australia, Wellington and other places. So for us, this is an auspicious day. It's 2 years since Mindful Money started as a small charity and launched our online platform. And the aim then, as it is now, is to shift investment from pollution and exploitation towards social and environmental benefit. We've come a long way. We're trying to build a movement of people who care about where their money is invested and the impact of their money. We believe that empowered and motivated consumers are a powerful lever in order to achieve change for good in financial markets. We're engaging members of the public and financial sector through online seminars, workplace events, public education, social media coverage, and of course events like these. And transparency is a wonderful thing. A process of letting people know what's in their portfolios on a look-through basis helps people understand that investment has real-world consequences. If we are to make the transition to a low-emissions, equitable and sustainable world, then we need a massive shift of investors' capital. The good news is that change is happening at a rapid rate. ESG investing to manage financial risk has now become mainstream. And as we'll hear during the awards, the leaders are now pushing best practice into investing for positive impact. It's clear that the investment sector can play an important role in meeting the urgent challenges that lie ahead. Foremost of those is, of course, climate change. And we're starting our event tonight with a focus on climate finance in our monetary system and government policy. I'm deeply grateful to our two keynote speakers who I'll introduce shortly. We'll then follow with a fantastic panel, again themed around investing for climate solutions, and we'll have a Q&A. We'll then roll into the award celebration under the orchestration of the incomparable Te Reira. I hope he's in the room to hear that. And then we'll finish with networking, drinks, and some food. And for those who are up for it, we'll complete the evening with celebrations down the road at the Conservatory on North Wharf. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker. Adrian Orr is the Governor of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and formerly CEO of New Zealand Superannuation Fund. I probably didn't need to tell you that at all. The issues of climate change, social equity, and environmental integrity have been woven through Adrian's illustrious career. I can think of no better speaker to start us off in this conference. I'm delighted to welcome Adrian to address us tonight.
It's wonderful to be here. I do want to say it is an absolute privilege to be talking to you. It is a disappointment that I can't be there in person. I think you all know the reason. We've had the good wake-up call once again, particularly down here in the capital in Wellington. Scan your QR codes and keep each other safe. These COVID risks are still very prevalent. Congratulations to all involved in the Mindful Money efforts today, particularly the hard-working organisers and our Responsible Investment Association in the background, of course. A lot of mahi to have you all here. I wish everyone in the audience good luck for the awards. The mere fact, I know this sounds like one of those sports ones, the mere fact that you're in the audience means you're a winner already, means that you truly are putting your mind to these issues. So well done. I'll pass on my greetings to Minister Shaw and the two Rods who are here are going to be discussing climate change. Erica, well done, and Bridget and Barry, thank you for including the bank today, at least via this video link. I'm just going to talk just very briefly about Te Pūtea Mātua, the Reserve Bank, and what we're doing around being mindful. I know that we stand between you, a good debate, and even more importantly, some prize givings and networking. For us, Te Pūtea Mātua, we see ourselves as the kaitiaki of New Zealand's financial system, the caretaker, the guardian, for a significant, important part of the New Zealand economy. Our latest statement of intent, and I have bought a beautiful copy here. Apparently this is a raspberry, this colour. Don't give me the raspberry, but this is our new statement of intent, fresh off the press today. And I highlight that because it outlines our commitment to the public of New Zealand for the next 3 or so years ahead, and particularly over the next 12 months. And so it's a very timely reminder for you all, if you wish to go and have a read, and more importantly, to hold us accountable for what we claim we're going to be doing. Our kaitiaki role is done really with the aim of promoting economic well-being and prosperity for all New Zealanders. We talk about that as toitu ohanga and toitu te oranga, and so that's about well-being and prosperity. And we deliver that through, I would say, very well-known bits of legislation and operation. But I want to chat a little bit today, just beyond that, to areas that wouldn't normally, I suppose, be considered strictly central banking, even just a few years ago, but now really are central to us succeeding as kaitiakitanga. So what are we doing? Well, we, at the base, we're ensuring with our monetary policy that the New Zealand currency remains a store of value. That means that inflation remains low and stable, and that when we're doing that, we contribute to maximum sustainable employment. So that's a very traditional central bank role. We also have the prudential role in our kaitiaki activities, where we aim to ensure that all financial market participants, including those there with you today, are well governed, well capitalised, and promote public confidence in the products and decisions people make. And you all know how complex they are for people. And of course, we also provide a safe and efficient payment and settlement systems. We bank the banks bank everyone in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we have a very critical role to make sure that that works, that flows and operates. So in achieving our tasks, we don't just spend a narrow view down there. We have to have a very holistic view given our monetary policy, our prudential regulatory policies, and being a banker to the banks. We have a very holistic view around what we do. We aim to be a great team and the best central bank possible, and I'm talking about globally, not in New Zealand. In Te Reo, we talk about that as Mātangi Rua ki Mātangi Rea. Mātangi Rua is the call, when you're all on the walkout, the sails are at full, and the captain, the navigator, can call out Mātangi Rua. Everyone's working together, everything's at full tilt, and you know that you're being a great team. Ngā Tangiroa for us is around the baskets of knowledge that sit high above us, and it's really a call for us when we're operating under Ngā Tangiroa to be reaching for the sky, achieving for the best that we can get, and that's around the reach for the knowledge we need to be both a great team and the best central bank. So that's our call, and I think it's a very useful call for you all today, and I'll come back to that. Around our values, I've talked about our vision. We've got a clear set of values, and I want to labour this a bit because it's the values that you are reflecting in the audience today that are having you up for the awards and really bringing that confidence that you must bring to your customers. Our values, we think of wānanga or innovation, and wānanga, we chose wānanga because really it's about the collective wisdom. It's about bringing together and benefiting from the diversity of views. We can't sit here and pretend we're a monopoly on knowledge. We are far from it, both within the bank but also around the wider economy, bringing knowledge together. Tauira, or integrity, reminds us that if we are about the prudential regulation, we ourselves have to live by our own principles. And toira, or inclusion, meaning that by binding all of the individual strengths we bring, both at the bank and across the wider economy, we will be stronger for the future. So a great vision, a great set of values, and bringing that together to really deliver on our commitments to you through our statement of intent. I mentioned the holistic view. I'll just talk about three very briefly kind of activities we're taking. That sits under bringing a Te Ao Māori lens to the work we're doing here at the bank, how we are taking on board all of the challenges that climate change and the risks that come with it into our behaviours, and a lot of work in our broader rohi in the South Pacific around remittances and remittance payments. I emphasise, they would sound like three quite unusual, non-traditional activities, perhaps remittance payments, but really they are absolutely at the core of us achieving our mandate around maximum sustainable employment and a stable financial system, bringing that well-being and prosperity to all. With regard to the Te Ao Māori, we acknowledge that being a public sector institution, we have a very special relationship we need to reflect with Māori. We've been increasing our efforts on this front, and most recently we published a document we supported, Te Ohanga Māori, which is really an updated report from our good friends Burl around the state of the broad Māori economy. It's good news. It's a good news story, and it's a story that we need to hear more about rather than all of the negative news we tend to hear about economic activity globally. The good news is the capital value of the Māori economy is growing rapidly, outpacing the general economy. Māori employment has been very strong and has tended to lag, but employment has been going very strongly. And the really important part is that Māori, as a proportion of our labour force and going into the future, are becoming an incredibly important, educated and entrepreneurial component of our total economy. So the success of the Māori economy is the success of the New Zealand economy and well-being for everyone. One of the issues that we are assisting on bringing our skills of the central bank in really resonates from recent work from the New Zealand Productivity Commission and a lot of anecdotal evidence that we knew that access to capital remains a real challenge for the continued economic development of New Zealand and the Māori economy especially. So we're doing a lot of work that we hope to be bringing back to all early next year, and that's really about what unique features of Māori economic activity and for broader New Zealand means that access to capital is limited. How can we ensure that good opportunities are invested in? Some of the unique features, of course, is collective land ownership. and that creates a real problem for leverage, for being able to borrow or get third parties to invest in your business. How can financial engineering assist? How can law changes or our own regulatory changes assist in reducing some of those barriers? And of course, here in New Zealand, without a home, you have have minimum collateral to borrow against, and with Māori home ownership being lower than average, how does that lead into a vicious rather than virtuous circle of getting access to good investment? We're doing a lot of quantitative work. We're doing qualitative work. We are working across a broad range of iwi, pan, tribal groups, a lot of the retail banking system, and talking with a vast range of investors around getting to the real nub of the issue that we can put on the table for a decent conversation around how can we do better in this space. On climate risk, you've got a good afternoon ahead of you on that. I just wanted to say we are right amongst it. We've kind of got three legs to our climate risk attack. The first one, of course, is making sure what we do makes sense. And in our core functions, we've been working a lot with fellow regulators and our own banks and insurance companies in our supervision roles around highlighting the climate risks, trying to identify, measure, and make sure decisions are being made appropriately, measuring our own direct impacts through our own activities, and also a leadership role using our connectedness as a central bank globally across all of these areas. So we are very busy amongst it. I'm very proud that we can be working with the Sustainable Finance Forum, the Climate Change Commission and all of their work, and the work that the Ministry for the Environment has ahead of them. So we've been open doors, and we're using our role in the Council of Financial Regulators to facilitate a broader conversation across financial regulators on all of these issues. We've been upskilling our own supervisors with the Financial Markets Authority through education processes, and we are very connected into this network for greening the financial system, which is a global network of around 90 central banks and financial regulators internationally, and that's all of the usual challenges of collaboration, comparing and learning together around how we can operate efficiently and effectively as central banks and regulators in this climate risk. As you can see, the Mātangirua Ki Mātangirea call, sits there aloud, working together as one, reaching for the sky, is a powerful call. Collectively, we can make a difference. I very much hope that all of you in the audience are, of course, doing this with your own portfolios, your own customers, and your own asset allocation. If not, I'm sure you'll be told why you should be in the next half hour or hour or so. Lastly, I'll just finish mentioning a real challenge that we are amongst here in the South Pacific, and that is nicely called de-risking, which is really about traditional financial service providers exiting business, especially when it comes to regard to remittance payments to other countries. Our role amongst the Pacific Island nations is very important, at least through scale and sophistication of what we can bring. That's both the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and the Reserve Bank of Australia. And we have, a very large Pacific Island heritage populations in our country. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, around just over 8% of the population is of Pacific Island heritage, and our island nations are highly dependent on payments of people working here sending money home. The World Bank recently came out with some stats which are pretty surprising. For 2020, Tonga's GDP, 40% of that is made up of remittances from offshore going back to Tonga to support their families, to support their well-being. It's around 20% for Samoa and down to around 7% for Fiji. And a big proportion of those remittances come from here, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So these, we are an important recipient of labour, generator of wealth, and creator of overall financial stability and well-being in our region. For this to work, those remittance channels have to be working. We've stepped in with New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade with their support to work very hard on keeping those channels open, those remittance channels. We're working with many agencies internationally. I've mentioned the Reserve Bank of Australia, the IMF, the Asian Development Bank, and quite a broad series. We've got Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, Timor-Leste, Tonga, Vanuatu, and a lot of other partners collectively as central banks working hard on creating what we, a know your customer framework. Know your customer really is around making sure we know whose money is going to who, and avoiding a lot of the money laundering challenges where the anti-money laundering legislation is both beneficial but a significant hindrance to the business of remittance. So we are doing our bit. We are calling out for banks in the region to do their bits as well. We don't want to be building this bridge just in time to find that there's no one there to cross it. And so we really are running against the tide of de-risking out there. So ask your banks, what are they doing? Are they playing a role? Are they being long-term responsible in this space for our region? So those are three areas where we have been doing our best to be mindful with our money. I want to congratulate everyone in the room again, and fingers crossed for the winners. As you can see, I've talked about our purpose, our vision, our values. Those are all at the core of being mindful around being this kaitiaki role that we have here at Tuputia Matua for the financial system as a whole. So, mei te ma'ata, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Adrian. That was great. A tour de force. Thank you. I'd now like to warmly welcome Honourable James Shaw. He's Minister for Climate Change, Minister for Statistics, and Associate Finance Minister. Over the past 4 years, James has skillfully led the process of laying sound foundations for climate action, the Zero Carbon Act, the Climate Commission, climate disclosure legislation, and climate transition policies. We look forward to hearing about the role of finance in particular in driving our pathway to net zero emissions. Please give a very warm welcome to James Shaw.
Good afternoon. Look, I am really sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person. Obviously, it was my intention to be there, but global pandemics being what they are, you just get me in a room with my printer. So I hope you're having an excellent conference, and I'll obviously make it to next year's. Look, I just wanted to start by referencing something that Rod Carr said when he gave us their final report on how to reduce New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions over the course of the coming 15 years. And in reference to the finding that the Commission came to, that the transition was going to be far less expensive than previous modelling had suggested, and in fact could actually end up being of net benefit, a higher level of GDP than would otherwise be found, that would happen under a sort of business as usual scenario, is because the transition itself represents a significant GDP. So tearing out all of our old coal-fired boilers and replacing them with, wood chip or with electricity creates GDP, because GDP is merely a measure of economic throughput and economic activity. Replacing all of our vehicles, our internal combustion engine vehicles, with electrics for the light vehicle fleet, or with hydrogen or biofuels for our trucks, that's GDP. Turning our refinery into a biofuels refinery, that's GDP. Literally everything that we need to do to decarbonise the economy over the course of the coming decades represents significant economic activity, and therefore, if it's framed up well and well managed, can actually represent a significant return on, or opportunities for return on investment for investors. And so we very quickly come back to the role of finance in the transition, and it is something that over the previous term of our government we made some headway on, laying the groundwork, but it is something that we're intending to put a lot more effort into over the rest of this term of government. So I just wanted to reference some of what we have done and what's coming up shortly. One of the most significant measures, of course, is the emissions trading scheme, which is, of course, in the headlines at the moment because there is a bit of a debate about the extent to which we rely on the emissions trading scheme only as the primary tool to manage the transition. The previous Labor government under Helen Clark brought in the emissions trading scheme originally in 2008. After the Christchurch earthquakes and the GFC, the John Key-led national government downgraded the ETS significantly, and it's really only now recovering as a result of reforms, of a significant reform process that was actually kicked off in about 2016. We picked it up when we entered government at the end of 2017, and today the price of a unit of carbon is $43, which is the highest it's ever been. When I came into government in 2017, I think it was $17, so you can see it's gone up almost 2.5 times over the course of the last 3.5 years. The nature of the emissions trading scheme is that, you know, if you pollute the atmosphere by putting greenhouse gases into it, then you face a liability. If you can draw down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and really the only technology that we've got available to us at the moment to do that is through the planting of forests, then you get a payout under the scheme. If you do neither, if you don't put anything into the atmosphere or take anything out of the atmosphere, then nothing happens. You neither face a liability nor do you get any credit. But as the price of carbon rises, you can see that there are opportunities there for how to finance the transition. Now, historically, New Zealand has tended to adopt a behaviour of planting our way out of the problem. Because the price of planting forests is comparatively cheap, when you put it alongside, for example, changing out your plant that might have, like a coal-fired boiler, for example, to dry milk and turn it into milk powder, that's a significant capital investment. And so behaviour over the course of the lifetime of the emissions trading scheme has generally been for people to simply plant trees to offset existing activity rather than to invest in changing their existing activity. But as that price rises, then there are different points at which it actually makes far more sense to swap out the existing technology for new ones. And so again, there is a role here for banks and for direct investment organisations to get involved in organisations that want to make that transition to reduce their liability of the greenhouse gases that they're putting into the atmosphere. Because essentially, if you know that the price of a unit today is $40, but it's, for example, going to be $60 in the not too distant future, then there should be a financial instrument in the market that says, well, actually there is a way here in which I as a bank might be able to reduce your liability or help you to reduce your liability in a way that kind of works for both of us. And I think that is underdeveloped yet in New Zealand, and that's largely because the prices of a tonne of carbon has really only started to be meaningful in the past couple of years, and people have only really started to have confidence that that trajectory is going to be up probably over the course of the last 2 years in particular. So the ETS reform package, a huge amount of work over the course of the last few years, isn't quite complete. There's some more amendments coming up, but I think that you are starting to see there a market that does have some integrity to it, does represent a real impost on pollution, and you are starting to see behaviour change as a result of that. So that's the first instrument that we're using to drive climate finance. Second of all, at the beginning of the last term, we started the process of setting up New Zealand Green Investment Finance Limited. That is a direct investment house. It's a Schedule 4 Crown company, and what that means is that it can have a dual mandate. It is a fully commercial investment bank in the sense that it has to make a profit, but it also, and in fact primarily, has the mandate of reducing New Zealand's greenhouse gases over the course of the next 30 years down to net zero. And so the reason why we wanted to set up a commercial operation was so that it can crowd in private finance from the private sector to act as a multiplier effectively. But New Zealand, up until we set up New Zealand Green Investment Finance, didn't have a specialist decarbonisation direct investment house. And so New Zealand Green Investment Finance is able to operate on its own, but it's also essentially a service on behalf of the entire investment community to be able to do some market making work, develop those propositions, and then start to work alongside whether they're banks or other investment funds, KiwiSaver funds, and so on. And so we started with what could be described as the minimum viable proposition of $100 million. That was really because we wanted to force it to focus on crowding in private finance, but also we wanted to walk before we could run. It's, I think, now established its credibility in the field, made a number of early investments, and so in the most recent budget we put in an additional $300 million, quadrupling the size of the fund up to $400 million. And so it's starting to represent a really significant force in the New Zealand marketplace. The third thing that we did, of course, which has only really just taken effect, but we signalled in the previous term of government, was that because the 7-year contracts on the default KiwiSaver funds was up for renewal, we took that opportunity to say that the next set of default funds would have to be fossil fuel free in their investment portfolio. Now, the reason why we felt comfortable making that decision is because the default funds essentially have government sponsorship. They are private funds, obviously, but because they are set up as default funds and because 75% of people who go into a default fund don't then subsequently switch out of it, they do have a huge home field advantage over other funds in the marketplace. And so because they have the leg up of that government sponsorship through the default system, we felt that it was within our remit to make sure that our policy of driving towards a decarbonised economy was part of that. And of course, I think what that also does then is it sends a signal out to the rest of the KiwiSaver market as well. The fourth thing that I have to say, I don't think that we've made as much progress on as I would like, but you are starting to see some activity in New Zealand is around green bonds. So this is a very large and rapidly growing sector internationally, and it is being driven out of close neighbours of ours, including Australia and Singapore. And those of you who are from Auckland will know, somewhat famously, Auckland Council raised and was oversubscribed a very substantial green bond in the previous term of our government to help them with the decarbonisation of the transport system in Auckland. Treasury so far has not yet made much use of green bonds, and I think that the argument that they would make is because New Zealand is a AAA rated country, doesn't really have an access to credit problem. I would say that there are ancillary benefits that go along with the raising of green bonds that we have yet to explore in this country, and I do hope that we'll see some progress on that over the course of the coming months and years. Now, the fifth piece of the jigsaw puzzle when it comes to green finance and climate finance is around the recommendations internationally of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures that was set up or launched at Paris in 2015, just prior to the signing of the Paris Agreement, by Mark Carney, who at that time was the Governor of the Bank of England, and Michael Bloomberg, who at that time was just finishing up as Mayor of New York. Their recommendations were that we have a mandatory regime for companies to disclose their climate-related risks in order to make it transparent to directors and shareholders the actual scale of risk that is sitting on corporate balance sheets. And in their analysis, that globally there are trillions of dollars of unquantified, undisclosed, and unreported risk sitting on corporate balance sheets, and obviously that was seen as a significant risk to those businesses, to their shareholders, but also actually to the financial system at large, which is why Adrian and the Reserve Bank have taken such a keen interest in it, because the Reserve Bank's view is that even here in New Zealand, that scale of risk that may well be present also here in the New Zealand private sector also constitutes a material risk to our financial system and to the stability of our financial system, and that therefore we also ought to make sure that that is disclosed here. So I was delighted that New Zealand actually was the first country in the world to introduce legislation for a mandatory disclosure regime for climate-related risks, and that is currently at Select Committee and working its way through the House. And I think once that system gets up and running, and it will take a while to implement fully, even after the legislation and the regulations are complete, because we've got to build the capability as a country to be able to do this work. But I think that will quite quickly take hold. Then I think that what you will see is a significant shift in the flow of capital away from things that are disclosed or discovered to be high risk, and towards things that are discovered to be low risk, or at the very least that those high risk things will be priced accordingly, and that low carbon and climate resilient businesses will face lower cost of capital and better access to capital. So I'm really excited about that, and the US Congress has just passed a bill saying that they will bring in a similar regime in the United States. That has already passed the Senate, so we'll see how that goes. But the Conservative government in the UK is also introducing legislation to make it mandatory over there, and there are something like 60 reserve banks around the world that are looking at it for their countries. So that's the kind of lay of the land at the moment. It's a pretty busy landscape, obviously, and it is leading to significant shifts in behaviour. Ethical investment, low climate investment is a really hot topic in the sector as a result, and I'm delighted about that. It does raise some questions, of course, about how government finances the transition directly. So far, everything I've been talking about is essentially private capital, and we are looking at how we can change the way that government funds and finances intergenerational, distributed, complex challenges like climate change, because under the Public Finance Act, it is really not well set up to be able to deal with that. And so Grant Robertson signalled that in his budget speech this year, along with an intention that from next year's budget, we will be fully recycling all proceeds from the emissions trading scheme back into the transition. Now, how we do that, Cabinet hasn't made any decisions yet, and there is still quite a process to go through. But the process that we're currently going through of writing the Emissions Reduction Plan, which is our statutory response to the Climate Change Commission's recommendations, including those all-important emissions budgets and the policy program for how we intend to live within those budgets, will include a chapter on climate finance and on how the government intends to use its own financial resources to support the transition. And so I would say that the course of the next 6 months will be, if not determinative, then very significant in terms of the role that we see for climate finance in Aotearoa New Zealand over the course of the coming months and years. So like I said at the beginning, I think that transition, and I have always held out this view, some might call me Pollyannish on it, but I do think that there are tremendous opportunities here for Aotearoa New Zealand in the transition, as long as we plan it well and make decisions with the best wisdom that we have available to us to make sure that we are making not just treating this as a sunk cost, but really as an investment in the future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
So thank you very much to Minister Jane Shaw. That was a great run through climate policy, and I particularly noted the chapter in the government's response to the Climate Commission including a chapter on climate finance. So I think that's great news for many of us in this room. So the scene is now set. We now have a fantastic panel to discuss finance for climate action. I'd like you to please welcome, firstly by Zoom, Rod Carr. Rod is Chair of the Climate Change Commission, Hei Pouarangi, formerly Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank and Vice Chancellor of the University of Canterbury. Joining also by Zoom is Erica Finney. She's Executive Director of grassroots campaigning organisation 350 Aotearoa, which has been a powerful voice calling for fossil fuel divestment. We welcome Bridget Coates, Co-Chair of the Sustainable Finance Forum, Chair of Fonterra's Sustainability Advisory Panel, and formerly a leader of the Knowledge Wave Conference. And last but by no means least, very warm welcome to Rod Oram, business journalist and hugely respected thinker and researcher on climate change. So welcome panel, please join us for those who are here up front, and others will log you into Zoom.
Around the Climate Change Commission's advice, and in particular a commentary on the role of finance and markets. The first observation that should be made is that the Commission is providing advice on the direction of policy to government, and it is the government, our elected representatives, who we determine New Zealand's emissions budgets and an emissions reduction plan to put New Zealand on a pathway to achieve our domestic targets and fulfill our international obligations under the Paris Agreement. Not surprisingly, with my background in money and finance, I have a great respect for the role that finance, markets and prices must play in mobilizing the capital and influencing the choices that producers, consumers and investors face in the decades to come as we move to decarbonise particularly our production of energy and our transport networks, but also as we move to more sustainable forms of the production and food and fibre necessary to feed our world. That said, the Commission's conclusion is that our emissions trading scheme is not yet fit for the purpose which it needs to perform. And further, that even a fully adequately designed and supported ETS needs mates if we are to achieve the transition that we are required to achieve in a way that is sustainable, that is just, inclusive, and has regard to our treaty obligations and to future generations. I would make 3 critiques of markets. First, by definition, markets are myopic. They discount the future heavily. And yet we know, for reasons of intergenerational equity, that we are the guardians of the yet to be born. And that as those guardians, there is a legitimate discussion around what, if any, discount rate should be applied to the unborn generations to come. And the assumption that new technologies will bless them with options and choices which will more than pay for the options we have exercised cannot be relied on. Secondly, markets misprice risk, particularly the risk of low probability but catastrophic failure. It's why we see limited liability companies, why we don't make children inherit the debts of their parents, and why it is important that we don't assume that markets will price catastrophic risk appropriately. And even those strong proponents of markets agree that markets are indifferent to the allocation of costs and benefits, and that to rely on the tax and welfare system alone to redistribute those costs and benefits as society wishes is to ignore the reality of politics in a democracy, where often those with the windfall gains are reluctant to pass them over to those who bear burdens they cannot avoid. And finally, there is a cash constraint, that while value may exist, it cannot always be realised in the absence of complete markets for the distribution of finance. And the reality is that some households simply do not have access to the capital that would enable them to move to lower operating costs in the future. So there is a part for markets and prices that is an important role for our emissions trading scheme. But to rely on them alone to support this transition is to take an enormous risk that we will never get started and never fulfil the journey. So the Commission's work has been to provide not only advice to the government on budgets for emissions that would be compatible with our targets, but also advice about the direction of policy necessary to support market instruments and the choices consumers, producers, and investors must face. The mobilisation of global capital is well underway, and that is very reassuring. But that mobilisation has come about largely because the great reinsurers started running climate scenarios 15 years ago, which led them to understand the real risks that financial capital faces if it is funding stranded assets and soon to be decommissioned fossil fuel-based technologies. Global finance turns out to be leading, not lagging, in the need for urgent action to address climate. And finally, in summary, there are 3 things that the Commission has recommended the government must do. It must act now, it must act in partnership, and it must act in a way that supports markets through mates in regulation. Happy to be engaged in this discussion with members of this panel. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Rod. Can we have a round of applause, please? So, Rod, as a follow-up question for you. So the final report of the Commission included a call for the removal of barriers and introduction of incentives for the growth of sustainable finance. You've talked a little bit about it, but can you elaborate a little bit more on the kind of measures that you think specifically on finance may be most useful in order to accelerate that pace of change?
But we do support financial disclosure. The disclosure regime that the government has already planned to legislate to cover some 200 entities, we think is a good first step, but should be extended so that climate change financial risk is disclosed as widely as possible to as many stakeholders as possible. We know and believe that that which is not monitored will never get managed. And as a consequence, a relatively universal agreed set of standards for financial risk arising from climate change will help investors make wise choices. But secondly, we do believe that the recycling of proceeds from the auctions of NZUs under the emissions trading scheme should be ring-fenced and used to accelerate emissions reduction and potentially wider issues around adaptation. Disclosure matters a lot because it can inform better resource allocation, but disclosure alone does not guarantee action. That money will seek rates of return, and from that point of view, the use of some elements of incentives and subsidies will bring forward change that might otherwise have occurred but later. And time is of the essence. There is no doubt that we have lagged in our need for action, and that lagging will cost us more every year we procrastinate and delay.
Good. I'm sure that we can all support you in that call for urgent action. I'm going to come to Bridget next, but those of you at the back, there are actually lots of seats down the front here. If you'd like to take a weight off your feet, please feel free to come down first couple of rows.
I believe by a number of you in this room, in fact 200 people in the business community and government, came together under the auspices of the Aotearoa Circle and developed the Sustainable Finance Forum Roadmap, which I thoroughly commend to you if you're not familiar with it. The roadmap has the primary objective of moving the financial system in New Zealand to respond to global challenges, global changes that are sweeping, as Rod said, sweeping the financial system worldwide. In fact, as probably most of you know, we are well behind in some areas, and in terms of responsiveness, we are now fast catching up, and the Sustainable Finance Forum is very much a part of trying to drive and accelerate that process. So so perhaps just before I talk about progress, the roadmap exists to cover 3 different areas. The firstly is changing mindsets. So very much the way that Mindful Money is focusing on the individual retail investor and their response to their KiwiSaver alternatives. We're also very, very interested in making the principles of sustainability that we've heard about today already far more visible to the broader population in New Zealand, to understand, as James said, the huge opportunities this represents for us to migrate our particularly energy, transport, food systems, to a more sustainable future. And of course, part of that is the fact that in many cases there is little choice, because the momentum coming from our overseas counterparts in the banking system, in the insurance world, as was commented, in the global food system, is driving change very, very fast, and the momentum is quite remarkable in these areas. So, firstly, changing mindsets. Secondly, funding the greening of the financial system. So, finding ways of working in partnership, as Rod said, finding mates, especially with government, that will assist in developing standards and taxonomies for the financial system that enables more ready use of things like green bonds in the corporate sector. At the moment, the lack of standardisation is a real issue. It does hold people back from adopting these types of instruments. So there's a lot to do in that area. We're accelerating the development of things like supporting the Green Impact Fund and other private sector funds that have come forward that are looking at impact, looking at sustainability as their primary objectives. There's those of you, as we're going to find out in the awards this afternoon, there has been a burgeoning of these offerings to the market, and this is very important part of the work as well. And then greening the transition. So again, looking at the constraints that are operating in the system and making sure that we remove as many of them as we possibly can. So to date, our primary objective has been the establishment of the Centre for Sustainable Finance. Pleased to say that has been launched in 1 month's time. We are delighted at the financial support and endorsement that we have had from the banks, from many corporates, from a number of financial intermediaries in the market, have stepped forward, have financed a relatively greenfields and unknown centre based on the roadmap and on the objectives that have been set in the roadmap. The centre will deliver against those objectives, and we're looking forward very much to the launch at the end of the month, 29th of July, and to celebrating actually everybody's engagement and support. All of you, I'm sure, support the establishment of the centre, which will act as a coordinator, an amplifier, a energizer against these principles, and make the principles of sustainable finance as visible and as powerful as we possibly can, working with government and across the private sector very broadly. So, Barry, I think we'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. For many of us, I don't think we yet realise what a substantive change that will be to have a Sustainable Finance Centre, a secretariat, a work stream, energy, a forum, galvanising action around these issues. I think this is fantastic news. So, looking forward, maybe a year or two, where do you think the momentum is? Where do you think the things are that we will be able to look at in a while and say, okay, here's something that's really generating energy and momentum and progress?
So I'd perhaps just allude right now to the 4 projects that we have going on, all of which we believe will make a substantive difference in the short term, as well as going forward. The first is a significant capability building program. We've developed essentially an education program in sustainability that is available to the community, first through our partners in the centre, but then more broadly to those who are employed in the banks, for instance, who find that their knowledge of these concepts is not sufficient for the type of work they're being asked to do now. Those in corporates that are outside perhaps the sustainability team, but now need to know a lot more. They need to be able to talk to customers, they need to be able to talk to their staff, about the concepts of sustainability that we are all familiar with, but that are really not widely understood in the workplace. And so Ernst & Young, to give enormous credit, have developed an MBA in sustainability. It's a micro-credentials program, and it will be available in the workplace, course by course, piece by piece, so that people don't have to abstract themselves from their work for a year or an extended period of time. It can be done alongside their existing work. So that's an important development, and I think it was James who mentioned capability as being one of the biggest areas, which certainly the feedback that we've had from the marketplace, a real concern in that area. Secondly, we've worked on the Sustainable Agriculture Financing Initiative, which is a really good example of a great taxonomy set of standards in a very, very important sector. And this has been convened in association with all of the banks. We now have a framework whereby a bank can talk to a lender in the agricultural sector about their sustainability position, their farm environment plan, their water, their soil measurement systems, in a way that is recognised across all the banks. So you've got standardisation of pricing, of information. Over time, we believe that this will make a big difference to the agricultural sector and their interfacing with these issues. Again, taking the randomness out of the conversations. Thirdly, to come back to this matter that Rod raised of inclusion, there is a group, as we know in our community, that are excluded from the financial system in a way that should be worrying to all of us, and it certainly worries us at the centre. And we're working very hard with community finance and other non-profits to look at ways that we can improve inclusion, reduce the number of unbanked, address the issues that community faces in accessing the banking system, and finding different ways of approaching that area. So, Barry, I think we'll be pleased with those pieces of progress in a year or so.
Cool. I think those are all very exciting developments, and more power to the Sustainable Finance Forum for their work. Erica, I'm going to pass to you, and a very warm welcome. I know you had intended to be here and got stymied at the last minute. So welcome by Zoom anyway. Thank you for joining us. So over to you.
Kia ora koutou, and thanks for having me, Barry. It's actually been snowing here in Wellington, so my wish to be in Auckland is even a bit higher than usual. So my name is Erica Finney. I'm the director of 350 Aotearoa, and our mission is to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and we mobilise communities Aotearoa to take collective action to call on our major institutions to divest from fossil fuels. We're also part of a global movement that has campaigned thousands of city councils, universities, investment funds and governments to divest from the fossil fuel industry. We know that it's still possible to keep global temperature rise below the 1.5 degree limit, but the window of opportunity for acting on climate change is rapidly narrowing. There's a major barrier to progress. Before they die, the fossil fuel industry is determined to build as many new fossil fuel projects as they can, locking us into decades of carbon emissions. So we need urgent action to ensure that no new fossil fuel projects are funded and that existing projects wind down to keep fossil fuels in the ground. To date, the financial sector has been the fossil fuel industry's biggest enabler to keep polluting. By investing in the companies most responsible for climate change, our finance sector is complicit in causing the crisis. In the same vein, our financial sector is essential to a low-carbon future. Investors must choose to cut their ties with fossil fuels and finance the shift to 100% clean energy. And as we've heard from Rod, every day we don't act is a lost opportunity and increases the future cost and drastic nature of our transition. If we don't act at pace and scale now, we lock ourselves into devastating temperature increases. The science is clear. We need a controlled but rapid phase out of fossil fuels. Every institution and every single level of government must withdraw its support from the fossil fuel industry, be that investments, sponsorships, subsidies or permits. We've already seen a trend towards funds guided by ESG principles, as well as the introduction of mandatory financial risk disclosure, but this doesn't go far enough. What we really need is no more money in fossil fuels. That means we need to see our major public funds like ACC and New Zealand Super Fund fully divest from climate-wrecking fossil fuels and protect our public money from the risk of stranded assets. We also need to see every other investor in this room today follow suit and join the movement of funds worth over $14 trillion who've already divested from fossil fuels.
Great.
Thank you very much, Erica. Round of applause. So, Erica, as you know, we've been doing graphs for a while of the S&P coal index and oil and gas index against the S&P 500. It sort of follows the oil and gas index, tracks the S&P 500 until about 2015 when Mark Carney and others warned of climate risk and stranded assets. And subsequently, the oil and gas index dropped by around 60% compared to the baseline, and several times compared to the S&P 500. So my question is, given those returns, financial returns, haven't exactly been stellar, shall we say, for the fossil fuel industry, why do you think that funds have been so slow to divest?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, we've already heard from Rod in terms of how the market's failing us. And it is pretty wild, given that clean energy is cheaper, it's better for our health and for our environment. And we've got an abundance of potential for renewable energy generation here in Aotearoa. So why are we having a hard time moving towards clean energy? There's a pretty stale and stubborn ideology governing our thinking and systems that's holding us back. My sense is the main thing holding investors back is a fear of change. There's a theory that we need to invest in what's out there, all of it, even if it's causing irreversible harm and pushing our planet to the brink of collapse, because that's how you maximise returns. Similarly, we've got politicians saying that we're market neutral, that we're not picking winners and losers, even if it kills us and our planet. The lack of political will so far to actually create policies that will shape how our financial sector behaves is letting us down. And there's the fact that the fossil fuel industry has been driving an insidious PR campaign to fight for every last cent of profit. It's funding climate denial, and it's pushing a narrative that solving climate change is up to all of us taking individual action and offsetting our emissions. The reason investment providers are slow to divest is because the system around them hasn't changed. So that's one of the goals of what the fossil fuel divestment movement is focused on, is shaking the system awake, exposing the fossil fuel industry's harm, ending fossil fuel subsidies that skew the market value, and also sharing the success of fossil fuel divestment, that it's actually creating a strong return for investors.
Cool, thank you very much. With that, I think we'll pass to our final panellist. A very warm welcome, Rod. Over to you.
Kia ora tātou, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Barry, for including me in this. I want to start with a wonderful phrase from a British philosopher, Derek Parfit, who a few years before he died, this was back in 2011, he coined this wonderful phrase about the hinge of history. This being a very consequential time because of the confluence of the forces we've unleashed, whether they be technology or various crises, and our urgent need to act. And this is indeed an incredibly consequential time. And then for Aotearoa New Zealand, I would argue that actually this next 6 months is a particularly consequential time, because we've been laying down many of the broad frameworks we need, and indeed some of them are in considerable detail, such as the Climate Change Commission's final recommendations to government. But there is so little time in these last 6 months under the Zero Carbon Act legislation for the government to respond with its emissions reduction plan. And it's an unbelievably daunting task for the government and for public servants and the like to be able to give us that broad overview in the emissions reduction plan as to how the government is planning to respond. Now, what's really important about these 6 months, of course, is that that's not just a task for the government, but it's a task for all of us, whether we be in corporations, whether we be in civil society organisations of various kinds, even down to individual citizens, to be ramping up our activity, because this has to be a massive collective response. So I think a lot of things are going in the right direction here in New Zealand, but I'd like to focus in my last 2 points about where I think there needs to be a lot more movement. The first one is around the question of the co-crises of climate, but also of biodiversity. Because the Earth's living systems, represented by that biodiversity, is suffering extraordinary damage and deteriorating very, very rapidly. Now, the climate crisis is partly a cause of that and a driver of that, but very importantly, it's one of the most important responses for us are what is very broadly called nature-based solutions, where we are trying to use natural systems, natural processes, the rebuilding of ecosystems, to help us deal with the climate crisis. And the rough rule of thumb used widely is that nature-based solutions can be about a third of our response to the climate crisis. So it's not all about clean technologies like electric vehicles, which are very important, but it's about these nature-based solutions. Now, this is perfect for us in New Zealand, because of all the countries in the world, we have the largest stock of natural capital per capita of any country, the World Bank tells us, outside fossil fuel-based economies. Yet this is, and we know how important our natural capital is, very particularly for the primary sector, but the primary sector is only about 15% of our GDP. It's more like 20% if you also include pre-pandemic international tourism as well. But it's not just narrowly that direct contribution to GDP, but how natural capital underpins the quality of our life, our identity as a nation, and all the rest. So there's a lot more for us to do around that, and that's something we haven't really been locking on to at all effectively. Meanwhile, some of the big movements internationally are the 30 by 30 movement, which is led by a group of about 8 countries. New Zealand's not one of them, but it's a very interesting range from some developing countries right through to the likes of Switzerland and France and the UK. That by 2030, countries would designate and set in train plans to protect 30% of the oceanic resource of the world and 30% of the land resource of the world. And we're far off that. There is good progress here, not the least of which led by the Aotearoa Circle, which was established in 2018 to focus on natural capital. And the first fruits of its work is the sustainable finance work that Bridget has been describing earlier. That would be an area that I would urge us to be thinking far more actively about and engaging in. But the third one is about where investment is going, and thus the purpose of Mindful Money and these awards. I love the logo for the awards, this drip and the ripples that flow from it, which is absolutely perfect for thinking about the role of investment. And indeed, we know, and the awards and our judging process has clearly identified that we are making considerable progress there, but it's still incredibly early days. And there is a real need for ESG to move on from being an exercise that is largely buying in a lot of external evaluation of companies around ESG in which to help you make investment decisions, to being a far more active player in that. And I would point to one big driver I hope is coming. We're just getting used to the idea of TCFD, as in a Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. But the next one that's just been launched is TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. And again, there is a real head of steam developing around that, and that would be a perfect thing for us to embrace. I would offer just one last thought in closing, is that time is eye-wateringly short, because it's not just this crucial 6 months, but unless we are very seriously here in New Zealand and around the world bending down the curves, not just on emissions, but on all the degradation of ecosystems that we're causing over this next decade, then we have lost the game. So we're trying to achieve this unprecedented scale of change and complexity of change and speed of change that humankind's never come within Kuiu before. I can't emphasize enough that that is how much of a challenge we have to step up to.
Thank you very much, Rod. No, well appreciate that the natural capital issue is far wider than what we often immediately go towards, which is primary production. But specifically on primary production, do you have particular priorities for financial instruments or the role of finance in primary production moving towards a low carbon and more sustainable, more regenerative farming system?
Yes, absolutely. I spend a lot of time in the primary sector, and my essential message to farmers is that your land is only going to be ever more valuable, but you will be improving that land and contributing to the restoration of that land in ways that are financially enhancing, and therefore your asset will become more valuable. So in terms of financial mechanisms, I am a great believer in putting a price on agricultural emissions and ramping up to reasonably quickly to quite an important price signal there. But I'm also incredibly keen on biodiversity payments of various kinds. And I think that the work that David Hall and colleagues are doing on that, whether they be blue bonds or green bonds or debt for nature swaps and all these other very creative mechanisms, I think they hold tremendous value. But I think the absolutely first step is for our primary sector here to actually take ownership of the issue. So worldwide, land use and the production of food is actually the largest single driver of ecosystem degradation and climate change. Many other food producers around the world are taking that very seriously. So, for example, Nestle, the world's largest food company, has a goal to be, I think it's a 50% reduction in its emissions by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. Unilever is even more ambitious in its targets. But Nestle, 71.5% of those emissions within its sort of three-scope metric is from suppliers of food. One of them is Fonterra, and Nestle is Fonterra's largest customer. But Fonterra has yet to set a target for methane reduction by its farmers. And it seems to be no organisation is going to actually lock on to the issues until it sets itself some very rigorous reduction targets, even if it doesn't know how it's going to achieve them. But then that starts to focus its science and its R&D and everything else around that challenge. That's what Nestle has done. Fonterra is a customer of Nestle. I won't be relaxed until I see our primary producers here on that journey and using financial mechanisms very powerfully to help drive that change.
Thank you very much, Rod. That's very, very clear. We're out of time on the panel, so I'm just going to do a quick round and any concluding comments on the panel, on what others have said. Rod Carr, I'll come to you first. Sorry, Rod, you're on mute. While we sort that out, Bridget, over to you.
Sure. Look, just to pick up on James's comment about the opportunity here, because I do think sometimes we get buried in the difficulties and the challenges. But, you know, global consumers are wanting clean food from New Zealand. If we can meet that demand, our workers are wanting a sustainable future from our companies. We must meet that demand. We've got to try and see these opportunities for what they are and respond to them in a front-footed and more positive way, I think, rather than regarding them as a threat.
Over to you, Rob.
So hopefully we're now live. I would make the pitch that setting ambitious goals is entirely appropriate. Ambition often breeds success. But I would also say that all of us have got a role to play, and Erica has played it very well, in helping our elected leaders to make the tough choices that they have to make. That all too often in New Zealand, and in fact in Western democracies, we allow those with the voice of opposition to make the life of our elected leaders more difficult than it needs to be. And we can see that in the emerging discourse where those who wish others to act cry loudly for that action, while those who are required to act obfuscate and explain why the action required of them is not possible, equitable, or justified. And allowing some of those who are currently embedded in a high-emitting technology, allowing those people to win the narrative is a very real risk. So we need to call out those who promote straw men, which are not even in the advice that is being given. Whether they're our elected leaders, whether they're stakeholder advocacy groups or others, that it is all our job, not just those to our paid advocates, to call out the evidence that is sometimes missing. And I'll quote you 3 quick little examples. When elected members of Parliament are saying, why would we subsidise EVs before ICEs, or why would we ban ICEs before EVs are affordable, when no such propositions are in play, is a narrative that should never be allowed to live. Why would we let the narrative about banning gas for backyard barbecues and restaurants allow the debate about fossil fuel gas as a transition technology? Why we would allow the myth that the government closing down exploration for new gas fields would explain the current status of the gas supply in New Zealand's market to prevail are many of the types of straw men that are promoted. And we all have a duty to see them and call them out. So in closing, I would simply say finance matters a lot. Identifying the barriers and creating the enablers matters a lot. And the risks of failing to act are real. So I'm glad that you chose to spend your time invested in these matters at this time. Kia ora.
Thank you, Rob. Those straw men you describe are sort of eerily familiar to us all. Erica, over to you.
Yeah, I'll follow on from Rod. I think one of the important things for particularly financial institutions and investors to bear in mind is that for most of us, understanding where our money is being invested is in the too hard basket. So tools like Mindful Money have been fantastic in revealing what's under the covers. But the more that we see funds follow trends of ethical investment, and the more we see high polluters greenwashing their activities, the harder it is for us to understand the difference. So I really call on those who have been leading with ESG funds and leading in ethical investment and actually going and divesting from harmful companies rather than just tilting away from, to really celebrate that, to communicate why that's important, and to do it across all of your funds. So it's all very well to have one ethical fund sitting in a plethora of other investments. We need to see financial institutions setting that as the bar, so that those of us who are looking for the right place to go aren't being caught up in the weeds. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Erica. And final word to Rod.
Well, thank you. For all the complexity of this, I guess I have a very simple view of it. In terms of each of us can only do an infinitesimally small thing, albeit some of that is that people have more agency than others in terms of where they work. But together, we can achieve a sort of infinite amount. And to me, it's about the sheer creativity of that, the sheer excitement of that, about working towards this utterly necessary but very desirable future. And so, whilst I tend to be terribly earnest about the tasks ahead, I'm always keen to try and emphasise that sense of sort of excitement and the thrill of that creativity in responding to these challenges.
Fantastic. I think that's a great way to end the panel on the sense of excitement and opportunity that we all too often regard this transition that we're going through as pain and suffering, rather than the real opportunity, particularly for New Zealand as a nation, to leverage off our strengths and our assets. So please, a big round of applause for the panel. Our main course, which is the awards. This is the first year of these annual Ethical and Impact Investment Awards. So you're here, and you're here to help us kick off this annual event, which we hope will not only be a celebration but also a driver of best practice. As most of you know, the investment sector lacks accepted standards. It's a problem because it's too easy to make claims about being ethical, about being green or responsible or sustainable. And greenwash is undermining this kaupapa and confusing the public. It's one of the reasons we set up Mindful Money, to provide the transparency and the objective information. But it's also a reason to hold these awards. We hope that the celebration of these awards will help define that best practice and raise the level of ambition for the sector as a whole. And the good news is that standards are rising. Several of the judging panels commented that the standard of the entries for these awards is far higher than would have been even a couple of years ago. So we've seen a real shift. We've seen this drive for best practice, and we've seen this change. I want to say thank you to the 48 entrants to these awards. There were really very, very good entrants who we were unable to shortlist amongst a really strong field. And the judging process has been very thorough. We're grateful to 26 judges who voluntarily gave their time to judge the awards. We selected the judges based on their independence, their experience, and their insights. A number of you here were judges. Could you just kind of wave out? There's some who were unable to make it today because they're in Wellington and other places. But thank you all, and their profiles and lovely photographs of them are on our website. We'd love you to go and have a look at them. In the judging panels, there was discussion, debate, and challenge. But remarkably, there was consensus achieved across all of those 7 categories. So on with the show. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the incomparable Te Reira, humorous documentarian, raconteur, almost as well acquainted with receiving awards as giving them. Te Reira, we are your enthusiastic audience. Welcome.
You turn me on. Great. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome to this. What a great session that's been. And congratulations on all the good work that you are doing. I know that many of you passionately believe that the work that you do will make a better world, and I know that many of you passionately believe that the work you do will make you a lot of money. Some of you believe both. I don't care what you believe, so long as you're making a better world. Hey, now, Barry had rated us an intro and his own perspectives on ethical impact investment. There is nothing that I can add that you haven't already heard. I have literally no idea what you do. I googled it downstairs while I was drinking my coffee. $2.97 for a short black. That is a bargain. And it's probably good that I'm not really going to have a chance to speak because you've been sitting here a long time, because I'm currently, as many of you may find yourselves in from time to time, that kind of impotently but visceral rage caused by many of the things that Rod Carr spoke about, that's resulting in just a real desire for a climate cataclysm that will just rid my timeline of a lot of the people that he's talking about. So I'm just going to crack into it. I'm not, and actually it was really interesting, if we're looking at the primary sector, Ian Proudfoot's KPMG agribusiness report, it really noticed the kind of anger and the burnout, particularly out in that primary sector, in his opening at the field days the other day. So I'm glad that I'm here to celebrate what you do, because it's good and it's important that each of you remember what these awards are all about, that you remember who the finalists are, not only the winners, but who the finalists are, and that you go out and, as Rod said, actively talk about these kind of things, because too often at awards we see people coming up and doing this incredible work and being honoured, and the stories stay literally within the room or within the sector. So go out and listen to each of these finalists and what they've won for, and then go and bore people to death at dinner parties and on the sides of sport fields, and as you're queuing for a bus that may or may not turn up, it probably will, or literally anywhere to counter a lot of the kind of the negativity that's going on. So I'm going to crack into it. Hey, if at this stage, what about a round of applause for all the finalists? Great. Sincerely, if you are a finalist here tonight, you are a winner. but very soon some of you will be slightly more witty than others. So, what's going to happen? We have some highly commended and some winners. If you are highly commended, congratulations. You can come up to the stage to receive your award, but there is no need for you to speak. If your work speaks for itself. If you're a winner, please, immediately that your name is called out, look surprised, look humble. Come up to the stage, receive your award. You are welcome to speak briefly. Barry said 2 minutes. I think that was optimistic. I reckon if you can't get your message across in a minute... Because look, I don't know how many awards I host, but not once in 25 years of hosting awards has anyone said the night was great. I wish it had been longer. So, don't undo all of your good work by standing up here going on for ages. If it looks like you're going on and on for more than kind of about 2 minutes, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move closer to you. Till eventually I'm uncomfortably close. For many of you, that's now. You're also clean and well cologned. This is great. Really excited about being here. So, is that clear? That's all the housekeeping, isn't it? Let's crack into it. Hey, the first of our awards, Best Ethical Retail Investment Fund Provider. This award, and I'm glad that there's an explanation for this, this award is for the investment fund that demonstrates the most effective, responsible and ethical investment practices. And the finalists from what were a very large number of very strong entries. Let us have a look at the finalists for the Best Ethical Retail Investment Fund Provider. They were AMP Capital, Booster, Harbour, Mercer, and Pathfinder. A round of applause for all of them. Other event sponsors, take note of that excellent approach and arrival on the stage that Matthew, band from Trustees Executors, initiated there. Good timing. Get into it.
Kia ora and good evening, everybody. Trustees Executors is delighted to be a sponsor of this exciting awards event and presenting the award for Best Ethical Retail Investment Fund Provider. Is it a testament to the growing significance of ethical and responsible investing and that the industry now has an awards event to recognise and celebrate the achievements of those funds and individuals leading the market in this area and setting best practice standards. Good luck to all of tonight's finalists. In this retail category, the judges were looking for the provider that demonstrates leading practice in avoiding harm, improving company performance and investing in companies with social and environmental benefits. As Barry has said, there is a runner-up in this category, and the highly commended award goes to, highly commended, make sure I get the right envelope, Pathfinder Asset Management.
So the judges commended Pathfinder on its high standards, including comprehensive ethical screening, strong engagement to improve company ESG performance and investment in companies with positive impacts. So congratulations to Pathfinder, and great to see that you are here with quite a big team. Where's all the people from Pathfinder? Great work. Matthew.
Thank you very much. And now for the big reveal. Drum roll, please, Barry. The winner of the Best Ethical Retail Investment Fund Provider Award goes to Harbour Asset Management.
So congratulations, Harbour Asset Management. The judges were particularly impressed by your strong research capability and analysis of Australian and New Zealand companies. Harbour Asset Management have demonstrated in-depth engagement with companies with examples of how they have to have improved their ESG performance. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for this recognition. We really value this very much. We have been in this business as Harbour for going on 12 years now, embedding ESG into the processes that lead us to make our investment decisions. So it's really been gratifying that our team, who couldn't be with us today because they're sitting glued to their screens, no doubt, in Wellington, very pleased to accept this award on their behalf. So it's, there is no finish line for responsible investing, but we're very, very grateful for the acknowledgement. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. I have no idea what ESG is. Familiar with MSG. Is it the same thing? It's saltiness. Is it like, it's like the same? It's like the same.
Makes things taste better.
And now, when is it going to get a photograph? Are they going to do that now?
AZ, do you want to go and have photos?
We'll immortalise you forever in digital. All right. Why are you here, Barry? Oh, you're putting the award up. What about a round of applause for Barry and his team? What a great day, and really, you know, sometimes you do get to spend time with the presence of just really nice people, and he is one of them along with his team. So, the best new ethical fund. Ethical investment has been growing rapidly in this category, particularly recognises innovation. This award is for the most ethical KiwiSaver or investment fund launched over the past year. Great, some people had some time in lockdown to go, you know what, I reckon I'll start a KiwiSaver. I really should. So, the finalists, I won't do it as well as any of these. The finalists are Booster, Harbour, Mint, and Pathfinder. A round of applause for them. As we welcome Sam Goldwater from Generate KiwiSaver.
Thanks to Radar. Kia ora all. Generate KiwiSaver is delighted to be a sponsor of this fantastic event. I've been in touch with Barry plenty of times the last couple of months, and I know how much hard work him and his team have done, so big congrats. Now for the best new ethical fund, the judges were looking for a fund that pushes the boundary of ethical and responsible investing, and the judges unanimously agreed on a worthy winner. Now for the big roll, drum roll from the hands will be a little bit sore by the end of the night, no doubt. And the winner is Pathfinder.
Picking up a second certificate tonight, Pathfinder has released several exciting new funds, including the Ethical Growth Fund. The fund avoids investments in companies that cause harm, practices active ownership, and invests in companies with positive impacts, such as solar energy, mental health, women's livelihoods, and social housings. Congratulations, Pathfinder.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Mindful Money, for recognising the Ethical Growth Fund in this category, and I'd like to say a shout out to Barry and his team for what they've built with Mindful Money. It's an amazing tool for promoting transparency and better responsible practices in New Zealand, so well done. Look, I'm accepting this on behalf of several groups of people. One is the team at Pathfinder. Ethical investing is very important to us individually, and I think our procedures and methodologies sort of reflect the collective belief set of our team. So, well done, everyone. I'd like also to thank the investors that have invested in our funds, particularly this one. We built this fund for a diverse group of environmental and social charities, and so thank you to them for supporting us. Thank you.
Best Impact Investment Fund. This is an exciting category, recognising the funds that are going beyond ethical investing to focus on positive impact. This award is for the fund that demonstrates a strong purpose and a clear vision for how their enterprise is creating significant positive impact on people, communities and environment. And these pioneering finalists are Community Finance, Impact Enterprise Fund, Purpose Capital and Soul Capital. A round of applause for all of the finalists. Ian? No, that was the one. No, it's Paul. Hi, Paul. It's Paul.
I'm Paul Richardson. I'm the director of Mindful Money. Ian Reedy, unfortunately, can't make it here. As an ex-Wellingtonian, I can agree. Why would you be Wellington when the whole suburb is flowing? Probably out kayaking right now. So I'm standing in for what he would like to say. I would say for this exciting category is that the judges were looking for a provider that has shown leadership and pioneering this area where you're going beyond ethical into making an impact in society, and so we really commend the entrance in this. We have a highly commended as well as a winner. So that we do.
So delightfully arrhythmic, Barry.
So the highly commended for the Impact and Enterprise Fund.
Brilliant work from the Impact Enterprise Fund. They've broken new ground as New Zealand's first wholesale impact fund. They've put in place robust systems for finding prospective investments, working with them to help them become investable and doing due diligence. They've put in the hard work to create a pipeline of prospects and are now building a strong portfolio. So congratulations to you.
And so the winner in this category for the Best Impact Investment Fund of 2021, Community Finance.
Several weeks of delight for Community Finance. Some high fives as well. They're great. In this socially distanced time, that's inappropriate. The judges recognised the track record in finance for community housing that preceded the formation of Community Finance. The Salvation Army Community Bond was an innovative offering to finance 128 houses and apartments in Auckland, including mainstream financing from Generate KiwiSaver. And this provided a model for the launch of the Aotearoa Pledge, aiming to raise $100 million for social housing. Congratulations.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. And on behalf of all of the team at Community Finance, thanks to the judges and also to Mindful Money. I'd like to acknowledge the fellow finalists, Impact Enterprise Fund, Purpose Capital and Soul Capital. We're really proud to be part of this sector and proud of the work you do, so it's great to be with you. Can I also thank Barry Coates and the team at Mindful Money. What you're doing in bringing transparency to the market is just what New Zealand needed. Right time, right place. And I know a lot of us in our team have actually switched our KiwiSaver fund, having looked at your website and seeing, actually, that's not where we want our money to go. So thank you for letting us vote with our money for the world we want. I'd also like to acknowledge just quickly the staff and board that we get to serve with. It's such an honour to work with people who are passionate about making this country better. So thank you to the sector. We're really proud of a lot of the finalists here. We're already working with some of you, and we're looking forward to working with more of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Well said. And that ability for people who don't know, that people don't know what they don't know, and it's good to have someone who provides a platform that you can go on. One of the best ones I saw recently for anyone involved in free trade, fair trade, whatever it may be, and I've promoted this to a lot of farmers recently, was a QR code up in Asia, and you scanned your produce, and it told you, and this excited the farmers that I've been speaking to recently, it told you the price paid to the grower. Supermarkets weren't happy, but the farmers loved it. And again, just that ability to go onto the likes of the Mindful Money website and just and sit down and really make a conscious decision about what's going on. All right, the most effective investment fund for climate action. You're great. I suddenly thought, oh gosh, I hope she's not presenting and not nipping off for a drink. This is a related category focusing on the funds that are going to be key to transitioning to a zero emissions future. This award is for the fund that is investing in initiatives to reduce emissions, sequester carbon and or strengthen resilience. And these climate champion finalists are the Climate Venture Capital Fund and New Zealand Green Investment Finance. A round of applause to them. From Mercer, Tatiana is already here. Tatiana, great.
Sponsors, Mercer is very pleased to sponsor this very important evening and the awards. I am very excited for this category as we've heard so much today about climate action. So the judges were looking for the fund provided that will make the contributions to kickstart the much needed finance for climate solutions. The judges recognise that this category is still in its early days and are looking forward to a huge increase in interest in future years. I hope you can hear me in the back. There was a tie in this category, and the
people are on the edge of their seats. Who could the tie be between? Tatiana, who could the tie be between?
And the judges were impressed by the potential of both of these funds, but recognised they're still in the early stages of development, so well done. They have 2 highly commended awards. And we are all looking forward to, I'm sure, next year to see a winner in this category. Two highly commended awards. The first one goes to Barry's Imagine, please. Thank you. And the Most Effective Fund for Climate Action 2021 highly commended award goes to Climate Venture Capital Fund.
The Climate Venture Capital Fund is a start-up fund that aims to accelerate the hugely important role of investment for climate solutions. The judges complimented Lance Weeks, Rowan McMahon and the team for a well-designed fund, strong impact measures and exciting investment prospects.
Thank you. And magic again, Barry. And the second most highly commended award goes to...
Who could it be?
New Zealand Green Investment Finance.
Congratulations to New Zealand Green Investment Finance. They have a clear purpose and well-developed measures to assess the impact of investment. The judges look forward to seeing the fund become a catalyst for other investors as well as investing directly. And the government has recently provided a vote of confidence by a fourfold increase in their capital. So congratulations, New Zealand Green Investment Finance. Thank you. The best... What's that? You were super organised. I really appreciate it. Like, I tell you what, I do a lot of these, and some people, not here, that you're very good. Obviously, a lot. I really do appreciate this. Got to crack into it. I've got trees to plant. So, not even joking. I've got 700 of them put in just because I've got a carbon footprint the size of a clown shoe, and quite like to see like a tangible result of that going into the ground. This is a hugely important award, the Best Ethical Financial Advisor, for the financial advisor or advisory firm who can best demonstrate how their advice represents leading practice in ethical investing for their clients. And the finalists are Ethical Investing NZ, Money Matters, and Rutherford Reed. A round of applause for all of them. Victoria Harris from Devon Funds is going to present the award on behalf of our generous sponsors.
Thanks Rita, and good evening everyone. So Devon Funds is pleased to sponsor this exciting inaugural Mindful Money Awards event. We're passionate about integrating sustainable investing and promoting it in the wider community. So for this award, the judges were looking for a financial advisor that could demonstrate leading ethical practice. There was a strong field of contestants, and the judges wanted to say thank you to all entrants, particularly the finalists. But the winner is Money Matters.
So congratulations, Dr. Roger Spiller from Money Matters. Money does matter. Dr. Roger knows why.
Thrilled to win this award. Thank you so much, Barry, Mindful Money, the judges.
Oh, shall I read out why you won it?
Yes.
Go on. I got excited by the fact that I hadn't turned the page. I only got one job, read aloud, and I'm not even doing it very well. There was a strong field of entries, congratulations, and high standards from the finalists. However, Dr. Roger Spiller's entry, that's him there, stood out for its strong research and thought leadership over many years. His approach is flexible and thorough to meet clients' needs and aspirations. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And special thanks to the fellow finalists and the other nominees in this category. We're all working together and really making a big difference. I look forward to continuing to work with you. And thanks to the sponsors as well and the fund managers for their leadership in the field. Particular thanks though to Money Matters clients. For 30 years, I've been privileged to partner with individuals who have wanted to make money and make a difference. Their funding has supported a number of ethical investment funds to really take stock and to develop in New Zealand, and they've really done well and done good. I want to thank the Money Matters team, my colleague Kelly, who's been alongside me as a great financial planner for 15 years, and my wife Shelley Spiller, who is a professor of leadership, often talks about wayfinding and practices that in our business. She talks about how ethical investment advisors and their clients are wayfinders. We're transforming the financial system and financing the transformation needed for a sustainable future. So thank you everyone for being here this afternoon, for playing your part in our ethical finance community. I look forward to continuing to work with you all as we continue to aim higher.
reducing environmental, social and financial risk, increasing financial return and creating more positive environmental and social impact. Cheers.
Congratulations. Here's an important one. Best Media Reporting on Ethical and Impact Investments. This award is to showcase excellence in New Zealand media reporting on the relationship between investment and ethics, sustainability and social good. And the finalists from, again, a large number of really strong entries, and there is some very, very good work being done on this. The finalists, Daniel Smith with Good Returns, John Berry in collaboration with Stuff, Rob Stock with Stuff, and Deleted documentary on Stuff Circuit. So a round of applause for all of them. David Boyle from Mint Asset Management, one of our excellent leading sponsors. Welcome.
How's it going?
Great.
Good. Kia ora everyone. It's great to see so many actually familiar faces in this crowd. It kind of highlights the work that Mindful Money have done to bring a range of different industries, organisations, government agencies and fund managers like ourselves to celebrate what I think has been, when Barry first came to me, I think it was in February, to do something brave like this, starting an award that recognises the impact that investors and every New Zealander can make around this particular topic. And a big group that actually has a massive impact in that, of course, is the media. They're influencers, they have the ability to bring to life and hopefully look through some of the conversations and bring some reality to what the messaging around this area and this topic. And we've got a runner-up and a highly commended. The judges did state that there's some really great media reports coming through. And if I read the highly commended one first, don't worry about the drum roll. I'm looking forward to getting to the bars. That'd be very good. For the highly commended, we've got Deleted documentary Stuff Circuit.
That's right. Maybe with more drama, David. More drama. The Deleted documentary by Stuff Circuit. Hey, look, the judges were impressed by the in-depth research and investigation exposing the violations of the rights of the Uyghur people. The documentary makers were innovative in their multimedia treatment and their follow-up on the role of New Zealand funds and companies. So a round of applause for Deleted from Stuff Circuit.
Congratulations. And the winner for this year, and I think it's a very well-deserving winner as well, is Rob Stock from Stuff.
The judges said Rob Stock has consistently provided excellent articles on ethical and responsible investment issues over many years. He has undertaken new research and provided fresh perspectives to enable readers to take informed decisions about matching their investments with their ethics.
Oh, right, great, thanks. Terrific. It's wonderful to see that every single one of the people who was nominated is a colleague of mine. Rob Stuff. Daniel is here. He's up for Good Returns, but he's a Stuffy now. We've been writing about Q's ever since it launched, and it's been very interesting to write about its ethical journey and to watch it go. It's incredible how kind of far it's come and the momentum has picked up. I think there's 4 groups that have been key part in that. Yeah, we nudge it a long way. We can. There's been a small bunch of very committed MPs who were fighting for it not before we were writing about it, but before it was mainstream. There's a bunch of not-for-profits, Mindful Money being one of them, and then there's the key service providers who did decide, some of them very early, to get involved. And yeah, it's been incredible. There's further to go, but yes, it's wonderful. So thank you very much.
Congratulations, Rob. congratulations. The staff just celebrated their anniversary just a little while ago, their first anniversary from the spending of that simple $1. What a change a dollar can make in terms of ethical investment, and the change that they have brought to the media scene over the last 12 months has been really phenomenal. So, the final award is for the KiwiSaver Fund that demonstrates the most effective, responsible and ethical investment practices. It is for the best ethical KiwiSaver Fund provider. Now, this is obviously a high-profile category, and again, there was a really strong field of entrants. And the finalists and the best ethical KiwiSaver Fund provider are Booster, Generate, Mercer, Pathfinder, and Simplicity. And one of the event's general sponsors to announce the winners, or winner, Kerry Church from MoneyWorks. Welcome, how are you?
At MoneyWorks, we believe that KiwiSaver is the core foundational building block of a good financial planning strategy. We're really proud to be a sponsor of this event and the awards with Barry and his team. With over 3 million people now in KiwiSaver, investment managers have a really substantial opportunity to be able to influence the way that people look at their investments and the role that investments have in the world around us. The judges for this award were looking for a KiwiSaver manager that's not only being mindful of where their money is invested, but that are digging deeper, pushing the boundaries, and looking for investments that are actually doing good in the world. So this is the last award. Is anyone going to help Barry with the drum roll? And the winner of the award is Pathfinder.
Making it worthwhile for clearing out the office this afternoon, Pathfinder, all of whom are here, have raised the bar with its KiwiSaver funds, providing the public with opportunities to invest in sustainable themes such as renewable energy and access to water, and in impact companies that create social and environmental benefits. Pathfinder is a certified B Corp, and the principals, John Berry and Paul Brownsey, have shown public leadership on ethical investments. Congratulations.
Thank you to you, Radar, and I'll be put within a minute.
Right.
Short notes here, but thank you very much, firstly, to the judges for giving me your time. That is awesome of you, to the sponsors. Big thanks to Barry and Karen and the Mindful Money team. They've absolutely made a change. With their transparency, they've made a big change in the way fund managers think about investing and what they have in their portfolios, and it made life a lot easier for retail investors as well, which is awesome. A few years ago, Paul Brownsey, who co-founded Pathfinder with me, he and I had this vision for a new type of KiwiSaver that would be carbon neutral, that would be ethical, that would have a social enterprise approach where we're giving 20% of our revenue to charities, and most importantly, we generate awesome returns for our investors. And I'd like to thank the fantastic team at Pathfinder. You guys are awesome. With our team at Pathfinder, with our investors who have joined us in our KiwiSaver, there's many here tonight. I love you guys. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for helping us deliver on our dream. We've tried to really push the boundaries around what it means to invest ethically. A massive focus on climate change concerns, a massive focus on animal welfare, and also going into the impact space. So far we've invested in Sir John Kirwan's mental health app, Mentamia. We've invested in microfinance, supporting women entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia. We've invested in 2 social housing transactions with community finance, another award winner tonight. And we've also invested in a local solar energy project as well. So look, I'd just like to leave you with a thought, which is in investing in the funds management industry, we're not just custodians of people's money. We actually have a leadership role on signalling to corporates what behaviour we can tolerate, what behaviour we won't tolerate, what behaviour we want to encourage. And we need to use that opportunity, not just in the way we invest, but also in the way we spread our ideas and share ideas with each other. Again, a big thank you to Mindful Money, big impact on funds management, and Barry, we appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Well said. congratulations to all the winners, and congratulations to all of you. You all have the knowledge and the scale to be able to make changes that ordinary people who are just sitting at home thinking, what do I do with my KiwiSaver? I'm just going to invest it in more of a property portfolio. Can't do. So thank you all. Thanks to our excellent speakers and our panel. It is always a pleasure to hear all of them speak. So continue the good work. Barry is going to wrap it all up succinctly. No pressure. Thanks, Barry.
So, big round of applause for Te Reva! Yeah! He does this so well. We should have an award for Te Reva. So, I wanted to just conclude, and I know I'm keeping you from a drink, so I'll be very quick. Thanks very much to our sponsors, Generate KiwiSaver, Mint Asset Management, let me put on my glasses, Devon Funds, Moneyworks, Mercer, oh, it's all here, Trustees Executor, and Ian Rennie. So we're really grateful for you all. For any of you who aren't on that list, we can shift stuff around so we can make a little bit more room next year. If you'd like to be added to the list, that would be great. I also wanted to thank our sponsoring partners, our supporting partners. Sustainable Business Network have been fabulous with their advice and their inspiration for these awards. Minter Ellison Rudd Watts has provided us with legal advice, so thank you so much, Jeremy and others. It's great. Sustainalytics provides research and data. RIA, Responsible Investment Association of Australasia, would have had some people here. Matt Mims is here from the RIA board. They're a really valuable partner to us, so thank you for all that RIA does. And the Impact Investing Network. Having a dedicated network now for impact investing is hugely important, and there's lots of board members from Impact Investing Network National Advisory Board in the room, so thank you all very much. Thanks also to the team that put this together. You know, this was, we're a small staff at Mindful Money, and we had just fantastic volunteering help. Andy and Britta and all of the volunteers, Jonathan, you guys have, really just made this event happen, so thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause. So that's it. So we're going to have some drinks and food and some networking, some time for you to celebrate the winners, but please also celebrate all of the finalists and each other. We're going to do this for a while, and then if anyone wants to carry on celebrating, I know it's a little cold outside, but down on North Wharf there's a place called the Conservatory, so we'll be down there carrying on after we finish here, so please feel free to join us. Thank you all very much for coming, and really look forward to you coming back next year. Thanks.